Today, I'm going to be showing you guys how to produce a song in the style of 1,000 Miles by the Kid LAROI. We're going to be talking about how to mix 808. We're going to be talking about how to blend acoustic instruments with electronic elements. And I'm even going to show you one of my secrets for making sure that a beat fits with a vocalist. We're going to go through all of that. But before we jump into it, let me introduce myself. Hi, my name is Seth. I work as a producer under the name Velvet Ear, specialized in guitar-based pop music. I do one of these videos every Thursday to show people how to produce their own pop music at home. Songs I've produced or written have been featured on these playlists, and I did an entire album through Warner Music Group. So if you have an idea that you want to get off the ground, check out the top link in the comments below. All right, now let's jump into it. And here's the beat, so I'll just show you guys what we have. All right, let's start jumping into the individual elements of this beat. First, let's look at the kick drum, which is this decap kick. We're using this kick perf sample on preserved transient with the mode moving forward with the envelope at 69. Nice. And then after that, we're using some transient shaping to really pull down the sustain and make the attack really picky. I really wanted it to be this short, snappy kick, but I just kind of like the texture of this kick. After that, I'm going into some Slate virtual mix rack, and I just tweaked their general vibe strip for their kick. So with, without. Just a world of difference. So for the writing of the drums, I kind of wanted to emulate the way that 1,000 Miles kind of uses this syncopated kick drum pattern, but at the same time, it's not really overbearing. It's like this perfect middle ground. But the entire beat is kind of centered around this kick, and I'll show you why later on. So next up, we have these snares and these claps. This is a mixture of samples. You can see I muted some of them later on. Actually, it looks like I'm only using this one now. As you can see, I tried out a bunch of different samples, but I ended up muting most of them or not using them. So I ended up using this decap clap snare on one. A lot of the stuff that I used for this beat was straight up just like from decap, because a lot of his stuff is really perfect for this sort of like modern pop sound. As you can see, this snare sample had a bit of a lead in. So originally it was like this, but I really just wanted this second part. I just felt like for this song, the snare should be like pokey. Like it should have some girth behind it, but it should be poking out on top of the beat, because that's what I heard when I listened to 1,000 Miles. And then again, Slate Digital to the rescue. I'm on a new computer right now, which is why I'm so Slate Digital happy right now. I had a lot of fun messing around with their chains and their default presets and tweaking them a bit to whatever I needed. So without it, it sounds like this. On. It just feels like the snare wakes up. And then pretty much all the other drums are actually in this group, which I'll talk about later. But next I want to look at the 808, which is this guy. So with this 808, what I was really looking for was something that was aggressive enough to poke out through the mix and make the song feel energetic, but soft enough to where it wasn't completely overtaking everything. At the end of the day, this is a pop song, and at the end of the day, pop is always about the vocals. So it's important to make sure that the 808 is not stepping on top of that in any way. We're using the NASCAR 808 preset in Sublab, tweaked it a little bit. I normally adjust this release and the distortion a little bit. And then this is the Slate channel that I would say I tweaked the most, this 808 Wakey preset. So this Hollywood module is adding a lot of that saturation. You can hear if I turn it off. It's just like not there at all. So the way that I've been using this module is I'll turn the mix all the way up. Find the right kind of tubey distortion that I'm looking for, and then I'll just bring the mix knob back. And then, of course, use the trimmer to make sure that you're leveling it out at the right volume. After that, I did some EQ, just some general compression. You can see it's barely even touching here. Bass rider live again. Just sort of dynamically adjusting those bass notes to make sure they're all at the right volume, and then side chained it to the kick. For anyone who's watched my videos before, they know that I actually like using Soothe as a sidechain on the bass to dynamically pull down that fundamental out of the bass. But when I was listening to 1,000 Miles, I felt like I could hear the 808 like audibly ducking out and then coming back up after the kick drum. So I wanted to replicate that sound. Another thing I'm doing with this 808 is I'm actually sending it to this send here. So we're doing something pretty simple. I'm just sending this Sublab 808 completely to this send. On this send, I have this Arturia pre-1973, which is kind of like a Neve 1073 sound. And I'm just completely driving this input gain to just distort the crap out of it. And then after that, I've taken this Q8 stereo reverb from Waves and I've high-passed it. So what I've done is I've reversed the polarity, but only on the right side. So if I undo that, you can hear what I'm talking about. It just sounds like a normal bass right in the middle. But when I flip one side, it just makes the bass aggressive and on the sides without really messing up the stereo field in that lower end. And then you just sort of blend it in. I think I had about 33 there. If you want a wide sounding bass, do it on the high end because messing around with the low end in the stereo field doesn't really turn out that well most of the time. I really wanted to make sure that this kick drum was really prominent in the mix. So let me show you what I did to make sure that everything else in the mix sort of fit with the kick drum. I took everything other than my kick and snare and sub, and I put it in this group, and then this group is sidechained to the kick drum. So you can see that when I hit play, it's actually pulling down the volume of everything in this group, like a substantial amount. If I solo it by itself, it just feels like it's ducking randomly. But when I play it in context of the beat, you don't really hear that audible ducking sound, and it makes the beat a whole lot cleaner because the kick just has an entire song worth of space to fill up. Next for drums, I just wanted to keep it simple. I found this hi-hat loop from Decap. Again, it looks like it is the Decap F It Up loop. Again, just did some basic Slate Digital stuff. These presets that they have are really practical, so you don't really need to tweak around with them a lot. Normally, I'm adjusting the low end, things like the compression. This Revival is really great for adjusting how much brightness or thickness you want. I think I adjusted the compression here because on those open hi-hats, it was pulling it down a little bit too much. And then messing around with this virtual channel strip is actually a really worthwhile thing to do. And then I think for drums, the only other thing we have is, of course, clap impact. Just in case you were wondering. Next thing we will look at are these acoustic guitars, which sound like this. So I actually recorded these acoustics with this sort of crappy nylon string. As you can see, one of the strings is literally broken, so I couldn't write anything that used the high E string. And for recording them, I just have this AKG P170. Honestly, this is like my go-to pencil condenser. And if you're recording acoustics, this is kind of a must-have. So I just kind of pointed it at the neck joint, backed it up a few feet, and then angled it around to see what kind of tone I wanted. That nylon string actually has a lot of low mid-range, so I actually put it a little bit higher up the neck than I normally would, just to balance that out. And I just did a bunch of takes and I just wrote this progression, and I actually wrote this first. So this is what the rest of the beat was written around. And listening to 1,000 Miles, I just wanted to get that sort of like acoustic, sort of weird grungy thing going on. So from a writing standpoint, I kind of did the same thing they did. So in the verses, it's sort of this riff that goes back and forth. And then in the chorus, it's this progression of strummed chords. I think they might have actually used an acoustic in the original song. I wanted to use my nylon string because I thought it sounded cool. As you can see, we are double tracked. And then these guys are going into a group with, guess again, the acoustic guitar preset on virtual mix rack. Messed around a lot with how much low end and low mids that these guys had. I think also with this distressor, it was compressing them a little bit too much. I think it was like 6-1 or 10-1, so I brought it down a bit. And then I think Revival was for more of like a brighter acoustic, so I think I pulled this guy back. Might have turned the thickness up a bit. I honestly don't remember. But yeah, after I did that, I used L1 just to sort of level them out and keep them consistent without really crushing the dynamics. And then they were a little bit out of tune, and so I just kind of wanted to accentuate that with a little bit of distortion and wobble in RC20, make them not feel super clean and modern acoustics, make them sound sort of old and grungy. Not super lo-fi though. So once I actually had those acoustics, I felt like they weren't taking up enough space, so what I did was I duplicated them, basically used the exact same chain, and I used Sound Shifter from Waves and transposed them up an octave and threw some reverb on them. Here's what they sound like. I just feel like these guys filled up the sonic space a lot without necessarily adding another part. That's another reason why I love doubling things an octave up or an octave below. It's a really great way to add depth to a sound that you already have without necessarily writing another part. And then I just grouped all of them together and started playing around with the level of these guys, which are in their own group, until I felt like they were at the right level. A little bit of that Juice WRLD vibe. After the nylon string, we're going to be looking at the piano, which sounds like this. So I wanted to do two things with this piano. One, I wanted to add that sort of like discordiness at the end of the chorus, the same way that it does in 1,000 Miles. But also I wanted to add more of that like acoustic vibe to a trap beat, because that is kind of one of the main distinctions that I noticed about 1,000 Miles when I was listening to it, is like it's like singer-songwriter based writing, but then with a trap beat on top of it. So I feel like this really pushes it into that realm. I will turn off everything so that you can hear what we have. Just have addictive keys on this modern upright preset. What a surprise, we're running it into Virtual Mix Rack. And I changed some basic settings and then it was good. I think I boosted the shimmer a bit more than I normally would and then cut some of the low mids because we already had a lot of that going on with the guitars. And I wanted this to be more of like a thing that accentuated the guitars instead of like a new part. We then threw on some Mo-TT. It just makes it a little bit shinier. So if I turn it off and then on, and then there were some hyper resonant frequencies here in like the 1K range that I really didn't like, so I pulled them out. And then I wanted it to blend even more with that sort of lo-fi vibe, and I was in a funny mood. So I added some RC20. I use this Vinyl 1 preset like too often. Like I don't think I've ever used anything other than that, honestly. But gave it some warble and some distortion and high pass it a little bit. So here's what all of it sounds like with it on and off. On. And then off. It just makes it so much brighter and more present in the mix. But real quick, I want to show you a trick that I use when I'm writing beats like this. And this trick will guarantee that any beat that you write is going to work with a vocalist. So a problem that I see with a lot of beat producers is that they tend to overfill their beats with stuff to the point where it sounds cool on its own, but it can be kind of hard for a vocalist to find space on top of it. So what I love to do is find some vocal samples or acapellas in the key that I'm in and just throw them in and see if it feels like they fit. So for here, I just download some car samples and I'm just going to play it and see what they sound like in the context of a beat. All right, that felt good. Now let's do a chorus.
There's no one like me. There's no one like me. I can show you what love's supposed to be. There's no one like me.
To me, that feels like it fits on top of the beat really well. The thing to remember is that arrangement is always going to trump mixing in some way. So the best way to get a mix or a beat or a production that just fits with a vocal, you just need to arrange it well and be willing to take out some of those spicy bits that are your fun part and realize that we are making beats for people to sing on top of. So those are all the elements. Let's look at the mastering chain real quick. As you guys can see, I am still on a FabFilter kick. I'm probably going to buy all these plugins by the end of the week. But yeah, I've been having a lot of fun with FabFilter just because of how low the CPU usage is. And on things like a mastering chain, that's really important because adding an EQ to a mastering chain, especially one that's doing a lot of heavy processing, can really drag down a session. So I've been enjoying this one a lot. So as you can see, we have a bit of a high pass here that's just around 20 hertz. Doing a bit of low end correction here because it was getting a little too heavy. Looks like we're doing a big cut here in like the 200 to 2K range, just because it felt like it needed that space. And then we're doing a few cuts on the side. So all three of these EQ points are actually subtracting on the sides. So if I solo them, you can hear like this high pass filter here. It's just subtracting the sides up to like 250. That's a really high sort of side high pass, but I felt like this beat needed it because there was so much low end information that was sort of the center of the beat that I really wanted to make sure that it was mono. Then we have this cut here at around 500. And then we have another one here at around 1.4K. Again, we're not completely cutting these frequencies out of the beat. We're just trying to make sure that they're not crazy in the stereo field. Again, having some fun with the aggressive drive preset on Virtual Bus Compressor from Slate. Basically maxing it and then dialing back the mix so that it's more where I like it to be. With, without. With. Using some MV2 to sort of get this feeling that a compressor would normally give you without actually squashing those peaks. With, without. Max bass on the ultra low extender preset. You can actually listen and see what it's doing to the low end. So here's what the low end originally sounded like. And then, which in my opinion is a drastic improvement. So doing the same trick with FabFilter, Saturn 2, distorting these mids only, then dialing it back on the mix. All by itself, this is what the mids sound like. And then blend it in with, without. Using some fresh air from Slate to give it some high-end excitement with, without. With. And then using another FabFilter Pro Q to boost the sides. So it looks like we have a boost here at around 300, boosting around 1000, and then boosting everything from like 3.3K on up without. With. Just opens up so much more. So just using this limiter to sort of bring up everything a little bit so that the second limiter doesn't work as hard. You can see we're only doing about -17 LUFS. And then we have our modern compressor, aka Ozone Maximizer. For this example, I didn't really worry about pushing it all the way that I would for a normal song. If I was, I would probably bring this down to like -1. And then I've just started using this tool. This is great. So this is tonal balance from Ozone. So it has these profiles for different genres of music, and it can help you gauge overall generally where your frequency ranges should be. And you can use it in fine or broad. So the closer to the middle you get, the more you're in the general range for what a genre of this style would be. Again, it's not a hard set rule, but it really helps you when you're trying to gauge the overall tonal balance of the track that you're working on. And yeah, I think that's everything. So I think we will just listen to the track again. I will turn on the vocals this time so you can kind of hear the context of everything. And yeah, that's everything. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any other guitar-based pop songs that you would like to see covered in here, leave a comment below because I would love to do it. Again, I do one of these videos every Thursday, so please hit subscribe if you enjoyed stuff like this. And yeah, I will see you guys next week.